Good evening, welcome to our Policing Your Community online event for Mole Valley. I'm Lisa Townsend, your Police and Crime Commissioner, and I am joined in our studio at Police HQ in Guildford, Mount Brown, by Chief Constable Tim Meyer and your Borough Commander, Inspector James Green. Thank you so much for joining us. We carried out a series of in-person events. We were in Bear Green in October, and we wanted to give those of you who weren't able to attend in person the opportunity to join us online and have your say. So you are very welcome. You're going to hear from the three of us about the current state of policing in Surrey. You're going to hear from our Chief Constable, who's been in post now for coming up to 9 months and has been spending part of that time developing his plan for policing in Surrey. So you're going to hear about that, and you're going to hear from your Borough Commander about how things are specifically in Mole Valley. Going to do our best to answer as many of your questions as possible. If you do have a question, please pop it in the comments section on Facebook or on YouTube, and we will get to as many of them as possible. If we're not able to get to your question, then we'll make sure that somebody comes back to you with an answer. So as your Police and Crime Commissioner, it is my responsibility, as well as holding the Chief Constable to account for the service that you receive, but also to make sure that residents have an opportunity to understand what the force's priorities are, and that you have an opportunity to engage with the force. And that's why these meetings are really important. And it is an important time for policing in our county. Thanks to the work that Surrey Police have done to recruit our share of the government's extra 20,000 officers, and thanks in particular to your council tax contributions over recent years, Surrey Police has grown by 395 police officers, making Surrey Police the largest that it's ever been in its history. Now, it does mean that we have a younger workforce, so it is going to take time to get those new recruits trained and get them out and about in our communities, which I know is where we all want to see them. Now, as well as holding the force to account, I'm also responsible for producing a police and crime plan that sets the direction for the force. The key priorities in my police and crime plan, which was developed in conjunction with local residents and organisations through consultation, are protecting people from harm, working with residents so that you feel safe, preventing violence against women and girls, ensuring safer Surrey roads, and strengthening the relationship between Surrey Police and its residents. Now, in the last year, my office has awarded over £5 million to local services, and this has included more funding than ever before for preventing violence against women and girls. We've been working actively with the force to improve the response that you get to antisocial behaviour and also the service that you receive when you dial 101, which of course is our non-emergency number. And I know that the Chief Constable is going to talk a little bit more about this shortly. On a national level, I take the lead on mental health and in particular policing's response to it, and also on transport. We're doing a lot of work around mental health both nationally and locally, and the Chief Constable is leading on that locally, and I know he's going to talk a bit about that as well. Surrey Police is an absolutely fantastic organisation, but the demand has never been greater on our staff and officers and the demand for our services. So as the Commissioner, I also oversee Surrey Police's budget and the assets. I have to balance the cost pressures that we are all facing, with my goal to provide the Chief Constable with the resources he needs to maintain and hopefully improve the services that you receive. It does include finding a further £17 to £20 million of savings in the next 4 years, and that's not going to be easy. Times are tough and it is really difficult asking people for money, but one of my responsibilities is to set the council tax precept each year. The Chief Constable is, as I said, going to talk to you shortly about his plan for Surrey and concentrating on doing what the police force does best, which is fighting crime and protecting our residents. And that's what you, the public, have told me that you want to see, and I know all of these meetings the Chief Constable has heard that as well. I believe the plan is going to significantly boost service that you receive in all of our communities, but in order to achieve it, we have to maintain appropriate funding for our police teams, and that's why I have to think very carefully about making sound long-term financial decisions. If you haven't already done so, then I would invite you to take part in the council tax the precept consultation. It's currently live and it's going to be running until the end of this month. You can find the link in the comments section of this meeting. It's on my office's website and it's on all of our social media fields. please do take just 5 minutes to fill it out and tell me what you think. The survey asks you to consider whether you would support a £13 a year rise on a council tax Band D property. That is the amount that the government is expecting. Or if you would prefer £10, £11 or £12 a year, or a figure under £10. Chief Constable has been clear with me that an increase below £10 on an average Band D property would mean further savings by Surrey Police. An increase of between 10 and 13 would mean Surrey Police will be able to keep up pace with inflation and keep any cuts to staff to a minimum. Whereas the maximum increase of £13 would provide the Chief Constable with most of the resources he needs to achieve his plans for the force, although Surrey Police would still need to find at least £17 million worth of savings over the next 4 years. Now, it's important that we make every efficiency that we can, and the force is undergoing a transformation programme designed to ensure we provide the best possible value for money to you, the public. Your contribution through council tax makes an enormous difference. For every pound of the precept set, Surrey Police receives an extra £500,000. Setting the precept is not a task that I take lightly. I appreciate that we all, whether it's as individuals, families and organisations, are struggling at the moment, but it is something that I want to do to absolutely ensure that the Chief Constable has the money he needs, but I want to hear your views on what you want as well. Now, you can scan the QR code that's currently up on your screens, and that will take you straight to the survey. I'm now going to hand over to the Chief Constable to set out his vision for Surrey Police.
Thank you, Police and Crime Commissioner, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to speak for 10 minutes or so on our plan, and generally this relates to our determination to fight crime and protect people, to earn your trust and confidence on which we depend for the information that we need to protect the public, and to be here for people when they need us, putting service to you before our own self-interest. There are about 10 key elements to this plan, and I'm going to start off by talking about preventing crime and solving problems. Now, Surrey has a really strong track record in crime prevention and problem solving long before I was privileged to take on this role, particularly working with partners to tackle crimes such as burglary, vehicle crime and antisocial behaviour. But we now need to put that expertise in solving problems to the problems which are facing us at the moment, and uppermost among those is violence against women and girls. There are 3 particular elements of violence against women and girls that I'm going to talk to you about briefly. The first is domestic abuse, where often the most vulnerable and the most dangerous are together behind closed doors. And I'm desperately anxious that victims and survivors of domestic abuse feel able and confident to report the crime and trust that we will respond swiftly, investigate the case thoroughly, make arrests wherever possible, bring offenders to justice and provide exemplary victim care. And we're already seeing the number of charges for domestic abuse, and in particular the rate of arrest, increase quite dramatically. Surrey Police has, in common with other forces, adopted Operation Soteria, which sets out new ways of dealing with rape and sexual offences, new ways of better caring for victims, better pursuing suspects, better understanding the context in which these cases happens, and disregarding the sorts of myths which commonly afflict these sorts of cases, or the perception of these cases. And we're determined to work with our partners in the Crown Prosecution Service to really increase the number of charges and ultimately, of course, convictions of those who commit these extremely serious crimes. And finally, we need to think about public space safety as it pertains to women and girls. And Surrey, I'm pleased to say, has in recent months been trialling Operation Shield, which makes the best use of specially trained women and men in behavioural detection to identify perpetrators whose behaviour on a nighttime economy might be quite incongruous with what you would expect, and reveals that actually they haven't gone for any legitimate purpose, but instead to target the vulnerable. We need to investigate crime thoroughly, a rather obvious point, you might reasonably say, but Surrey Police does not currently enjoy a particularly distinguished position when compared with other police forces in respect of the number of criminals who we put before the courts. There are many cases where it's appropriate, having solved a crime, for the offender not to be charged, but instead to be given a caution or some other sort of modest sanction. But in a great many cases, such as burglary, sexual offences, domestic abuse, and as I'll come on to, shoplifting, it's important that we put offenders before the courts. And I'm determined that we're going to increase our rate of charging. We're already seeing this in the crime of shoplifting in particular. Recently, the policing minister set out the importance of taking a zero tolerance approach to shoplifting, and we're increasing our rate of response to shoplifting, our pursuit of lines of inquiry in relation to the suspects identified, CCTV evidence, and so on, because we understand that shops are really important for communities, and it's an insult to the person who is paying when someone else isn't, whatever the motivation of the offender might be. We need to pursue criminals relentlessly. That means that when a suspect is identified, we need to follow the lines of inquiry which implicate or eliminate them from the offence. It also means taking advantage of the many powers that we've been given over the years to seize and confiscate criminal finance, taking that criminal money out of the system and making criminals pay where they least want to do so. And you'll be seeing a good many high-profile policing operations over the course of the next year, whether in respect of shoplifting, violence against women and girls, rural crime, which demonstrate our determination and our potency in tackling criminal offending. We need to provide outstanding victim and witness care. In a great many cases, the victim is the only witness, particularly in crimes such as rape, sexual offences, domestic abuse, stalking and harassment, and therefore the confidence in people to come forward and confide in us and the care that we provide thereafter is crucial in maintaining their cooperation from report right through to court. Your trust and confidence is really important to us because we know that the greater your trust, the more likely you are to confide in us with the information and the evidence that we need to act on in order to keep you and other people safe. And we can't reasonably expect you to trust us if we don't ourselves exhibit good standards of conduct. And you'll be aware, of course, of the really saddening recent examples in the last couple of years of really serious misconduct on the part of police officers. I don't for a moment suggest that I'm so complacent as to suppose that this couldn't happen in Surrey Police, and therefore we are really determined to make sure that we have the best standards of vetting, of re-vetting, of investigating complaints and investigating misconduct, and in training our many new officers in the importance of exhibiting the highest standards of behaviour, particularly in respect of things such as racism, misogyny, honesty and the integrity of data. We want to reflect our communities and be a police service where everyone and anyone feels that they can belong, not only because we want to be statistically representative of those who we serve, but also because we need the talents and abilities of every last person from whatever walk of life who could, if they joined us, be a brilliant police officer, detective, police staff investigator, call handler, communications expert. One could go on. It's really important that we attract the very best talent and ability because this is a competitive employment market in which we're operating, particularly in Surrey, which is an expensive place to live. And therefore, I'm determined that we become the most representative force that we can. And that doesn't mean simply being tolerant or inclusive when it comes to difference. It means really making people feel that ours is a workforce where anyone who wants to serve as they would wish to be served can feel they belong and fulfil their potential. We need to spend your money productively and wisely. I'm absolutely clear to officers and staff that the money entrusted to me to spend on your behalf was earned. It might have been spent on an individual's own interest or their family. Instead, it's come into the state through local or central taxation and then given to the police, where it might have been given to another public authority to spend. It's my moral responsibility, therefore, to spend that money to the greatest possible good. And we have to make hard decisions about where to spend that money when one considers the range of things that we have to do, from investigating paedophilia online through to policing high-profile events, combating domestic abuse, rural crime, and many more priorities that we have to attend to. And being productive means making sure that we're managing our contracts, our information technology, our processes as efficiently as we can, and also ensuring that we're coming in on budget. And we have a very comprehensive plan to ensure that whatever the position might be with the council tax, we are confident that we can make the savings that we need to ensure that we come in on budget without affecting the service, which is so essential to keep you safe. We need to be here for people who need us when they need us, and the Inspectorate has been absolutely clear that Surrey Police needs to do better in respect of answering 101, 999, responding to calls, following lines of inquiry, making arrests, and doing those things which only we can do. Hopefully you'll be reassured to learn that we had already identified the need to improve before His Majesty's Inspectorate advised the same. But if we want to respond promptly, we need to create the capacity to do so. And one such way that we're doing that is to implement the Right Care, Right Person scheme. What this will do is ensure that those in mental health crisis aren't relying on the services of a police officer who, however well-intentioned and caring, is not necessarily possessed of the training and experience and expertise that they need in meeting someone's mental health needs, and who, while they're doing that, cannot respond to burglary, domestic abuse, rural crime, or some other emergency with which only the police can deal. And I'm pleased to say that we're working at a senior and tactical level with partners to come up with new arrangements which will both deliver the right care to people in mental health crisis, but also free up officers and police staff to get on with only those things that only they can do. We need to be resilient and prepared, whether for a pandemic, a major operation such as policing the Epsom Derby protest, or something which could threaten our business continuity, such as a cyber attack. And that's why senior officers are constantly hypothesising as to the sorts of things we might have to contend with, and making sure that our officers and staff are trained to do so. And finally, policing is tough. Officers race to things which most would run from. They do things which most could not or would not do. Police staff in our control rooms, to mention but one example, will see and hear things in a day which mercifully most won't in a lifetime. And therefore, I need to ensure that we're keeping our officers and staff as healthy, fit and safe as we can, not only because that's the right thing to do to look after them as people, but because in so doing, they're then resilient and able to serve you. And I'll leave that there for now and hand on to your Borough Commander for the more local input.
Thank you, sir. My name's Inspector James Green. I'm the Borough Commander for Mole Valley Safer Neighbourhood team. So I'm here this evening to talk about the makeup of the Safer Neighbourhood team, how that fits into Surrey Police as a whole, to talk about what's important to you as a community, then consequently important to us as a Safer Neighbourhood team, and what our aims and ambitions and goals are for the coming year. So I'll firstly talk about how the Safer Neighbourhood team fits in with the wider policing team. So within the Safer Neighbourhood team with Mole Valley, I head up the team together with two of my sergeants. Below that we have the Safer Neighbourhood officers and neighbourhood specialist officers who represent particular areas around the borough of Mole Valley. So they are split up They will take a particular geographical area, and within that they will work on the local problems, so the local issues within the area, be that neighbourhood issues, be that antisocial behaviour, be that more acquisitive crimes such as burglary, keyless vehicle thefts, etc. And they will work on that and look at that and to see patterns and to enforce and to problem solve within the area. They will work in conjunction with our police community support officers. So they are the officers that you will see out on a daily basis. They are the ones that you'll see on the street that will be making contact with you if you've been a victim of crime, but will also be doing the engagement around the community, the ones that are going along and speaking to the residents, speaking to the local shopkeepers, seeing what the problems are, collating intelligence, and all of those that will work as a team to build a picture of what's happening in the Mole Valley area, and that will feed back to the bigger picture. We have our youth engagement officers. We have 2 youth engagement officers that deal with all youth-related issues within the borough. So they will be embedded into the schools to making contact, have the relevant contacts within the schools. They'll be working with the local youth services to see what support that we can give to those individuals that need them. They'll be making interventions, working with our child exploitation teams, with young persons that are coming to notice that we feel that we can actually work with our partner agencies and divert them to away from a life of crime or exploitation. I've mentioned that we talk about antisocial behaviour within the borough. We have an antisocial behaviour officer that is the expert in antisocial legislation, that can advise us on how to go through antisocial behaviour legislation, enforcement, with things like community behaviour orders, CPWs, community protection warnings, etc. And they can advise us on how to really get in and stuck and use antisocial legislation to solve the problems within the area. And also within the office, we have our office manager who sort of keeps us all together, does the administration for the team, and would answer emails, etc. And they work very closely with our volunteers that we have, members of the community who've thankfully given up their time to come in and assist police with victim contact, with vehicle maintenance, etc. And all create part of the Safer Neighbourhood team who are working for the residents of Mole Valley. So how does that fit into the bigger picture of policing within Surrey? So Surrey is split into 3 divisions, and within those divisions we have our investigations team, so our CID, which is Criminal Investigations Department, we have domestic abuse team, we have our child abuse teams, who investigate all those more serious crimes, the vulnerable people, protecting the vulnerable people of the area. We have a proactive team, a uniformed proactive team, who will go out, they will create the jobs that develop the intelligence around the area and act upon those. So dealing with more serious things like county lines and drugs within the area, they'll do the drug enforcement warrants for the area. We have our firearms teams, which is fairly self-explanatory. We have our roads policing teams that have responsibility for all the major roads in the areas. We have a dog section. We have our neighbourhood policing team, which in the briefest and sort of most concise ones there, if you dial 999, they are the officers that attend. They will operating a 24-hour shift pattern, 7 days a week, and they are the officers that are there to assist you at any time of the day or night. We have our child exploitation and missing unit that deal with vulnerable children and individuals that have gone missing, and that the police are taking actions to locate. We have an intelligence department collating all the intelligence that's coming from the members of the public or the members of police staff, putting that together to form a picture of what's going on in the local area and beyond. We have our contact and deployment department. Those are the ones that will answer the 999 calls, assess the risk and pass it to our force control room, who will then deploy the officers. We have our professional standards departments who are looking at the standards across the force and look at anything that maybe within the police needs to be rectified, needs to be investigated, and they will progress those investigations. We have our sexual offences investigation team, and then we have our criminal justice department. So quite a lot of departments all working together, all for the good of the local community. So within the Mole Valley area and the Safer Neighbourhood team, we need to define what's important to you and consequently what's important to us. So there are a number of different areas. So we want to confront antisocial behaviour. The antisocial behaviour can be a blight on the local community and have a huge detrimental impact on individuals, on families, etc. So this is where we will target, the Safer Neighbourhood team will target those perpetrators of antisocial behaviour and use relevant legislation and work with our partner agencies to try and solve these problems of antisocial behaviour within the area. We aim to reduce serious violence. This can be anything from an attack on a street after the pub's close of an evening to a directed attack against individuals for various reasons. Mole Valley has a huge rural area. We aim to tackle rural crime within that, and be that the antisocial behaviour that goes around it, the poaching, the coursing, and the associated criminal activity that's often quite organised in its nature. And for Mole Valley, we as a real aim for us is to tackle those perpetrators that commit the rural crime in the area and work with our local communities around that. We want to cut business crime. As we've already mentioned, the shoplifting is a priority for us now. We are looking at the perpetrators, local perpetrators of retail crime for shoplifting, but we're also looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at effectively organised crimes, people coming in from out of areas and committing large thefts, large shoplifts in our business community, and having that consequential knock-on effect to the feeling of safety within the area. Burglary is always going to be high on the agenda. Catching burglars is always going to be our priority. For victims of burglary, it's an incredibly impactful crime. And we, as a Safer Neighbourhood team, we work closely with our proactive team and our intelligence teams to develop that picture, to find out who is coming in, who is committing our burglaries, and who we need to target to make sure that Mole Valley is as safe as it can be. And overarching across the force and obviously Mole Valley is protecting the vulnerable within our community, whether those be victims of domestic abuse, whether they are children within the community, whether they be the vulnerable adults that are quite often targeted by those from organised criminal gangs. Identifying those vulnerable people within the community and protecting them through various means, it will always be a priority for us. So what do we want to do over the coming months and years? So working with our communities, working with the various communities around Mole Valley, so one of them being the rural communities, the setting up of rural crime meetings, developing a rural crime networks, proper reporting methods for the rural crime team, and giving the advice how to do that. The dedicated rural crime officer that we've just employed to make those contacts within the community. So we want to build on our cross-border relationships. Mole Valley, we have numerous borders, whether that's within Surrey Police, the Guildford Borough, or we go further south to Sussex. We have those communities that are just over the border that we need to link in with our partner agencies and our partner forces to share that intelligence and find out what's affecting them, because undoubtedly it will be affecting us as well. We want to be seen within the community. We want those people to say, I've seen my local officers, I know who my local officers are. So whether that is walking the beat, whether that is making contact with individual members of communities that are victims of crimes, or whether that's attending local community meetings or community events, to make sure that we're visible, that we're approachable, and we make sure the community feels like they are being policed how they wish to be policed. We got emphasis on antisocial behaviour. As I said, it can be a huge blight on the community. It can have a huge effect on individuals and a community. And by tackling perpetrators of antisocial behaviour, it means we can make Mole Valley and Surrey a safer place to live. We want to do more work around burglaries and vehicle theft. We want to target those organised crime groups that are coming into our area to target those properties and those vehicles within Mole Valley because they see them as an easy target. We want to stop Mole Valley and Surrey Police being seen as an easy target, to really pursue them and make sure and put them in front of the courts and make sure they pay the ultimate penalty. And finally, we want to continue to work with our partner agencies. Safer Neighbourhood Policing is all about partnership working with the local council, working with the local youth groups, the housing association. We can't do all the work that we need to do purely on our own. We need the support of our partner agencies, and we need to work with them effectively to solve the problems and to make Mole Valley a safer place to be.
Great, thank you very much to the Chief Constable and to the Borough Commander. I've been watching as your questions are coming in, so we're going to start with some of those. If you do have any questions that you want to ask, you haven't had a chance to do so yet, please pop them in the comments, whether that's on YouTube or on Facebook, and I will try to get to as many of them as possible over the next 25 minutes or so. So the first question we have in is for you, James. So it's from Graham. It's come through on YouTube. Graham lives in Betchworth, and he says Betchworth has a major speeding problem through the village, which has Speedwatch, but Speedwatch he believes is inadequate. It needs additional police monitoring to control. He says that he has raised this with you before. He believes Speedwatch needs additional signage. Now, Betchworth is, of course, a beautiful village, isn't it? And we know that speeding in, sort of coming into the village and out. And actually, I was there with one of your casualty reduction officers, Ed Ferris, not too long ago, on sort of school run time. And we did manage to catch quite a few people who were travelling without wearing seatbelts and sometimes were just over the speed limit as well. So what would you say to residents in Betchworth and about Speedwatch? I mean, Speedwatch is fantastic, isn't it?
Speedwatch is a fantastic scheme that is reliant on the people, the residents of the local community, giving up their time to tackle a problem that they see as hugely important within the area. It is reliant on those volunteers, but actually if you have the right volunteers and the right times and efforts are put into it, it can have amazing results in reducing things like speed, antisocial driving, etc. And what you've got to remember with Speedwatch, the information gathered by those volunteers is passed on to the police, and actually the police can take enforcement action on the evidence of those members of Speedwatch who have given up their time and collated that evidence for us. As far as the issue of speeding in the local area is a common one. It's a common one around Mole Valley. Mole Valley has a number of significant roads that are subject to a high amount of traffic, the A25 being one of them in particular. And it's a case of actually what can we do around that? The police does have limited resources. I'm not going to say otherwise, but what we do have in Mole Valley is a very good working relationship with our roads policing unit, who have an ongoing Operation Swordfish, that targets the areas around Dorking, around the Mickleham Bends especially, but do go out further to the areas of Betchworth to tackle antisocial driving, speeding, motorcycle issues that are in the area. And they are on regular patrol around there. It's one of their standing patrols. Surrey and Sussex Police has Operation Vanguard, that is a specialist operation that looks to go out, deal with driving offences that would lead to, if not dealt with, to effectively, at the worst case scenario, fatal road traffic accidents. So they are going out, they are enforcing and they are educating drivers around this as well. So all of these, and hopefully if you follow the Surrey Police and the Mole Valley Facebook page, you will see that there are a huge number of updates from both our roads policing units and our Operation Vanguard units, operating in the Mole Valley area. Together with our casualty reduction officer, Ed Ferris, who again is operating a huge amount of operations in the local area. So it is a case of we will continue to enforce, we will continue to educate, but schemes like Community Speedwatch are hugely important in raising the profile of the education of speeding drivers in the area. So we would always encourage that, we'd always look for new members, and we would always be there to provide that training. And we will continue to monitor those roads in the areas at peak times, in the areas stated by the local community as areas of issues. So we rely on your feedback to actually keep telling us of these areas, and we will keep being there for you.
Great, thank you very much. Karen on Facebook, her question actually follows on quite nicely from that. You talked about the amount of communications that we put up on social media, particularly from Road Safe, Vanguards, all of our teams. Karen says you post a lot on Facebook for both Surrey Police and Surrey Road Safe, which is great. But sometimes the communications are written using terminology not necessarily understood by, just put MOPs, members of the public. Yesterday's included KSI, for example. So KSI is killed or seriously injured. Could you consider writing these from a layman's perspective and also using a style adopted by Kingston Police, which is of course the Metropolitan Police, which has a huge following? So that's interesting. We could probably all do better on that. I know that Surrey Police on their website, I think it is, or Facebook page this week, are doing a breakdown of acronyms. So that's great for any of you who do look at our social media frequently or who are interested in crime shows on television. I'm sure that will be very interesting. But it is something, isn't it, Chief Constable, we could probably all be better at, which is that acronyms piece.
Yes, I completely agree. And we do deal with stuff which is quite complicated technically, legally, technologically and scientifically. And we really ought to be as disciplined as we can in explaining that in plain English in a way that people can easily digest. So that's certainly an important piece of learning we'll take away.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your question. Karen, I've got a question from Simon. Simon on Facebook. Simon is in Ashtead. Thank you very much, Simon. Simon believes that the presence of police on the streets is a really good deterrent for low and mid-level crime, and also builds relationships with the local community and business. And you've been talking about, Rob, about wanting police out there walking the beat and knowing their local communities. He says, however, in the past 6 years that I've lived in Ashtead, I've never seen a physical police officer of any rank in the local area and observation. So this is Ashtead in particular. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you assign officers and how that works? Because there absolutely have been officers out in Ashtead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Simon, you haven't seen them, but yeah.
No, exactly. And I think it's a common question we get asked quite a lot that, I haven't seen an officer for a very long time. Modern day policing has to be intelligence led. So we would look at crime trends, crime statistics, or just good old overnight, we'll look at where crimes have occurred. And we have to direct our resources where they are most suited and are most needed. So to see an officer out walking the beat is fantastic, and I think that there wouldn't be a person in the country that wouldn't love a local beat officer walking up and down the local community day in, day out. But actually, realistically, for the prevention and detection of crime, that isn't a particularly good use of policing resources. Policing resources now are targeted towards high crime areas, high antisocial behaviour areas, so we can prevent, we can detect, we can intervene when we are most needed. So what areas such as Ashtead see is the fact that realistically, on a whole, Ashtead is a low crime area. That doesn't mean that they don't deserve police attention. I absolutely agree that, and this is what I would like to promote within our team. But what I am saying is that the resources that we do have are finite, and we have to direct them to where they are most needed.
Thank you, James. That's helpful. Chief Constable, do you want to talk a little bit about policing visibility? Because it is something that we've been asked at all of the meetings, actually, that we've been doing.
Yes, it's a very important question and something we've been discussing only today with partners at a meeting to work out our approach to serious violence and the part which hotspot policing might play. And I agree completely with the Borough Commander that it's a sort of natural good, if you will, to have police officers seen alongside PCSOs patrolling particular areas and undoubtedly giving people a sense of security and reassurance. Crime, however, has changed over the last few decades. Whilst we still encounter the crimes that we always did, such as vehicle crime, street violence, traffic offences and burglary, we also now rightly respond much better to those crimes which take place behind closed doors, such as child abuse, domestic abuse, internet enabled paedophilia and many other sinister and serious crimes. And we have to allocate our resources according to where the greatest harm and the greatest need is. That doesn't mean there's not a sensible place for visibility, and what we're determined to do is get much better at identifying where the very small hotspots of lawlessness exist, where sustained and concentrated visibility and engagement will really make a difference.
Thank you very much. And following on a little bit from that, James, you mentioned that there's a new officer, dedicated officer looking at rural crime. Now, rural crime is something that we know that people, I get an awful lot of questions about rural crime from residents. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about Mole Valley, because Mole Valley does have quite a large rural area, particularly down to the south. You get down to Capel, Newdigate, sort of around those areas. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what this officer is going to be doing and what the rural communities in Mole Valley can expect.
Okay, thank you. As we said, the Mole Valley has a large rural area, and what we've started doing the last few months is to really try and make inroads with our rural community to have those points of contact, work with the Force Rural Crimes Officer to make sure that the community is represented, the community is heard. So we have effectively quarterly rural crime meetings. And that is it's a meeting that's effectively led by the rural community, and we have representatives obviously there from the police and the rural crime team. So we can sit there and listen to what their issues are and what their problems are in the rural community, and often about how we've responded to rural crimes that have been reported. What we have discovered is there is a significant amount of underreporting of rural crime within the area. And this is something that we are looking to tackle, and this is something that the dedicated rural crime officer is looking to really tackle as well. This will mean the fact that we have to build trust within the community. This means that we have to work with the key persons within the community that are already listening to us, and to make sure that we are getting out, we are visiting the individual landowners, the gamekeepers, the residents within those areas who are affected by rural crime, and to make sure that they know that this is your point of contact. You are being listened to, and please, if something is happening, then we need to know about it. So that way we can build a picture of what is going on within the community. Based on that, then we will develop days of action, nights of action around when there are key points when rural crime is likely to happen. We are going to build up an intelligence picture around those individuals who are committing that rural crime. And coupled with that is the fact that we are going to roll out effectively an educational program to the officers who aren't necessarily completely FA with dealing with rural crime. So if they are called to a rural crime and in the area, they have a better understanding of what they are dealing with, the offences involved, and actually what enforcement that we can take against any perpetrators of rural crime. So it's the start of a plan. The officer has only recently started with us, so we are going to build those links, educate our officers around it, and try and build that trust within the community. And on top of all of that are going to be our prevention and enforcement tactics over the coming year.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. Chief Constable, you took a lead in rural crime in your last force for a time. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about Surrey more widely and your thoughts around rural crime, because we're a lot less rural than your old force. We're a lot smaller, but it is still a challenge.
Yes, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to talk about this because I'm very concerned about rural crime, and I'm very keen that we improve our response to it, accepting that Surrey is a smaller force with, relatively speaking, more modest resources. I still think that there is more that we can do. So we know that farmers, for example, are the custodians of our countryside. We depend upon them for the security of our supply of food. And it's absolutely right, therefore, that police and law enforcement partners should protect the rural community. And it's very clear just how serious an effect a theft of a particular piece of equipment or a particular chemical can have if that takes place at a critical point in the annual cycle. We know how serious hair coursing, for example, can be in respect of crop damage, and the fact that that is engaged in by people with links to organised crime. I can't, unfortunately, promise to allocate lots of officers and staff to be dedicated only to rural crime, but what we can do is think about how, through better investigation, better use of our powers, better crime prevention in partnership with security marking companies, better target hardening, to use some jargon, so security improvement of repeat locations, we can really improve our response to rural crime and hopefully earn the trust of the rural community then to confide in us through more reports. And interestingly, I tasked our new Assistant Chief Constable for local policing on this very point only a couple of days ago to come up with a new plan.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chief Constable. You've got about 8 or 10 minutes left if there's a question you want to get in on policing, specifically in Mole Valley or policing anywhere in Surrey, and we'll make sure that we put it to the Chief Constable and the Borough Commander. I'm going to start with the Borough Commander on this one, and maybe, Chief, then you might want to chip in as well. So resident Charwood has said that his van has been broken into several times, but there was a limited response from the police. He doesn't say why. Could you say a little more about the response that somebody should expect to receive and that you'd expect officers to provide for that type of crime?
Okay, so for that type, we use that type of crime as that was raised. So the vehicles, especially vans being broken into and theft of tools, is a problem that we are seeing, and this we're not just within the Mole Valley area, but we're seeing on a force and effectively a regional level. These are usually organised criminal gangs that will target the vehicles overnight, taking the chance that tools are left in the vans. So the response that you should receive from Surrey Police would obviously be the reporting, after reporting the crime and the acknowledgement of the crime, to have an officer ring you back to talk about obviously the crime itself, what has been stolen, and actually would go through at that point lines of inquiry at the time. So what type of street you're on, or was it parked outside? Is there CCTV available, either residential or street? Do we believe there are any witnesses, and then would make an assessment on how Surrey Police deals with it from that point. From a local policing, from a safer neighbourhood point of view, my aim is for crimes such as these to deploy an officer. I haven't, within 72 hours, to actually make those inquiries, to look at the area to see if there are any investigative opportunities. What we do find a lot with crimes of these types, which is why it's so prolific in the region, is the fact that they will target vans and vehicles that in areas purposely that don't have CCTV, that maybe are not overlooked by other residents at a time of night that there are unlikely to be any witnesses. So they are limiting the amount of evidence, if any, that is available to detect that crime. We would also look at if there's anything alien left at the scene to see if there are any forensic opportunities, because these criminal gangs are very forensically aware. So what we aim to do is to effectively answer all of these questions and seeing what opportunities there are to investigate the crime. If there is evidence that we can pursue, we will pursue it. But all too often with crimes such as these, the evidence is lacking, and so we are left in the unfortunate position that we can't investigate it any further. There are no proportionate lines of inquiry. But as a Mole Valley Borough Commander, my aim is to have a physical representative of the police to speak with you and to look for those investigative opportunities.
Thank you very much. Now, we all rely on certain equipment, don't we, in our jobs? If your job requires equipment that then gets stolen overnight from your van, that can be quite devastating, Chief Constable. What would you be expecting the force to do in these scenarios?
Well, the first thing I would expect is that the person who takes the call doesn't only inquire of the victim as to what lines of inquiry there might be, such as doorbell footage, CCTV or potential witnesses, but is also themselves possessed of sufficient expertise that they can identify lines of inquiry of which the victim might not be aware. So it might be that there's automatic number plate recognition in the area which could give a clue as to vehicles linked to other offences which might somehow be involved in the crime. And whilst, as the Borough Commander says, it's difficult on occasion to solve a particular crime, by reporting that one offence, it might be the one which links to others, which begins alongside information from other sources to give us an indication of who or what groups are responsible for the crimes, and we can then put together a more proactive operation using roads policing, covert tactics and other means of enforcement which might catch the people responsible, and we have had some success in that respect. So please do report. Please expect all reasonable lines of inquiry to be followed up. We're working hard to improve the skill of the people who take the initial call so that they can identify better lines of inquiry themselves for our investigators to follow, and be reassured that if we don't get them for that job, we'll get them for another one.
Excellent, thank you. We've received complaints, and you'll be very aware of these, Borough Commander. We know there are complaints about motorcyclists driving antisocially, particularly on the A24. Is there an update that you can give to residents?
There isn't a significant update since the last neighbourhood meeting that we had. We have the problems around antisocial driving is heightened around the spring, summer months. So we've fallen into the period where the number of reports about antisocial riding of bikes has significantly dropped off. And I think we're still in contact with the local residents through the parish community, parish councils and the resident association to monitor that. And also obviously local businesses that are also affected by that as well. So as I mentioned before, the roads policing Operation Swordfish, is a year-round operation. And that continues on a regular basis. The added emphasis will come in the spring, summer months when the numbers of riders increase. You have the lighter evenings, and you have the increase of antisocial behaviour in the area. So that's as a borough plan. That's when our resources are going to be significantly upped in the area, and we will look to liaise with the local community, the local community groups to action that and actually to publicise that, because we know that it is a significant issue in the area. So any enforcement that we do is regularly published on our social media pages, but you will see an increase in activity once there is an increase increased police activity once there is an increase of incidents in the local areas.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to wrap up now, but before I do, James, I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about what has been the biggest policing success in Mole Valley in recent weeks or months.
So in recent months, we have had a significant drugs operation being conducted in the North Leatherhead area. And that has led to a a significant number of arrests, and currently we are in the process of seeking charges from the Crown Prosecution Service for those individuals, and we're extremely hopeful of getting those charges. And this effectively is an organised crime group that we've been very effective in dismantling in the Leatherhead area.
Great, thank you. And of course, not seen necessarily by residents, and that's great. And that work is
It's
obviously
something that
ongoing.
would be publicised more once we get convictions.
Once we get to conviction, right? Well, good luck for those convictions. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to James Green, Borough Commander, Tim Meyer, Chief Constable, and of course to Suzanne, who has been ably signing throughout all of this. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a safe evening.